Can I get a little hand up for those who can see my screen and see Mark and I's faces clearly, our wonderful faces, and hear my fantastic webinar voice? Oh, fantastic. All right, great. Well, we might get straight into it. There's still some people making their way in, but I'm mindful of time and we've only got 30 minutes, so we'll crack straight into it. So welcome everybody. My name is Doug Vincent. I'm the CEO of Mastt, and I'm joined here today by my long-term friend and colleague, Mark Winder, who is straight over to my right. Do you want to say something?
Go for it, mate. Welcome everyone. Good to see you all.
Yeah, some familiar names on the list. So today's webinar, Mark and I are going to be focusing on project management / contract administration's PMCA's management of defence finance. It's something very near and dear to our heart. And we're going to be exploring our lessons and opinions on the management of, north of $30 billion worth of PMCA projects that we've been in touch with over the last few years. So just before we do jump into it, just a little bit of housekeeping. So all attendees are muted. And if you do have a question, please raise your hand like you've been doing in the box. And then at the end of the webinar in the Q&A, or maybe even afterwards, I'll share my email because we're always really interested in getting feedback from you and hearing your opinions or how we can improve. And this is a recorded session, so don't worry too much about taking crazy notes or recording. I can send a link around afterwards. And then just very lastly, so these are just Mark and I's opinions and our lessons learned. This is not a defence mandated or an official defence webinar. This is just our opinions on how we think we can help you and help defence do things better. Now, how did Mark and I meet? So when I joined the project management side of the construction industry about 10 years ago now, Mark was actually my first boss, and we worked together on what was the DDG. At the time, it was called the Air Warfare Destroyer. Now it's called the DDG, and the LHD Facilities and Infrastructure Project. So this was a CFI project. It was what, a couple hundred million, 250 million. And building all sorts of infrastructure around Sydney Basin. And so through that project with Mark, that was kind of where I got to know all of the crazy spreadsheets that defence and project managers use to manage all of these projects. And this was a little bit shocking, and I've said this in past webinars, where you're managing what is really significant capability for the government. And then you're building, huge hospitals, naval wharves, training centres, and then you're using, a spreadsheet to manage what is, quite serious enabling infrastructure for the estate. And all of these projects would start the same way. You'd have your cost tracker with all your formulas in it, and then you'd have all these different little tabs along the bottom for your variations and your contracts, payments, and then maybe another tab for every payment claim. And then that would be copied and pasted into some form of standardized template or report for the defence client. And then we would send it up to defence, and they would then integrate it into their own internal financial reporting suite to get a portfolio view over all of the projects that they were responsible for. And this is very similar, not just in CFI, but also outside of CFI in the international infrastructure branch projects, and also across, Army, Air Force, Navy, etc. Everyone does it a very, very similar way. Now, the problem with that scenario is the real value add of the PMCA in the back and forth and the collaboration between the project manager and their project director, which in this case, my project director was Mark. And so I was doing all this very painful manual data entry nearly every day and became somewhat of a financial modeling expert for a capital works project. And then as I would give this information up to Mark, it was very difficult in a spreadsheet or partly spreadsheets-based systems for him to really add any value to the financial reporting at all. And when this is Defence's #1 problem, the rigor and quality that this process requires, needs to be there so that we can report accurately, into the Commonwealth. And so this existing process is just missing a lot of that granularity that the project director needs. And then when we would send it up to the client, by that stage, it's very much out of date. And they're trying to, incorporate this into another system to then get either a dashboard style report or another portfolio view report. And then by this stage, the data is very, very old. And so they're trying to make a decision on increasing the scope of projects or stopping or starting projects. And it's very difficult to do that with old information. And so out of that pain, after doing that for about 7 years, I saw an opportunity to make a bigger impact through building some software with a hyper focus on defence to make easier the life of a PMCA managing defence's finances. And so that was the beginning of Mastt. That was back in 2019. And since then, we now manage projects across the local estate for defence, the international estate, and then also outside in Army, etc. And what we're trying to do is really assist the PMCA in making their life a bit easier, managing the finances for defence so that they can look good and also defence can receive more accurate information. And so today we're going to be looking at some business rules for reporting. We'll look at proper allocation and reporting of risk provisions, which has been a very hot topic over the last couple of years. And then how we can automate some of those more mundane tasks like payment claims, payment statements and certificates using the system. And all of this aligns with our mission at Mastt, which is to digitize the construction industry globally. And there's 3 parts to our vision for project managers using our software. So the first pillar is all about governance. We've got risk register templates and all of these categorizations of things that we need to then implement. And we do that using our software, make easy the management of finances and the production of these artifacts as required by DECMS or any other governance suite. And what we can achieve in standardizing all of this is at the end of it, real-time data-driven lessons learned. And so we've been collecting a lot of valuable information over the last couple of years, and we're going to start to offer that back so that we can benchmark ourselves and try to outperform what is currently the standard. And this is very similar to a concept that we've seen and we all use every day, where you can think the town planners came up with the maps for all the cities, and then Google came along and replaced what was the yellow pages with software. So they've implemented and made easy their use of the maps, and then they give you this real-time lessons learned directly over the software, directly over the map, so that you can make a better decision on which direction you're going to take to get to your destination. So that's very similar to how we're thinking about our system here at Mastt. And so without further ado, let's crack into actually a detailed look at this using the system. And we're going to do this from the persona of a project manager and how they will get data in to Mastt, how they can then report and do that administration, and then how we can then make easier the integration of that information so that it can go into defence and they can take that information up quickly and easily. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is a HC/PMCA style project, and then we're going to cut across to an MC project, which Mark is going to run and share. So I'm going to do this HC part fairly quickly so that we can really get into the bones of an MC project. So I've just cut over now to the system. Can you guys all see? Whoop. Can you guys all see my screen? Yeah, very good. Got some hands up. And I'm going to jump straight into project A. So let's click the project A. We'll land firstly on the dashboard, but this webinar is not about reviewing the dashboard. So we're going to skip straight into the cost module, my personal favorite module, beginning of Mastt. And we land here on the overall page. Now, this is all very similar to how a PM would have set up their spreadsheets prior to using Mastt: budgets, contracts, variations, cash flow, and payment claims. And we break down the finances the way Defence do their reporting. So we have a development phase budget and a delivery phase budget. And then in this case, I have outside of that, the Defence contingency. Now within the delivery phase, I've broken this down a bit further, and I've got a PMCA budget, a DSC budget, contractor, etc., and risk provisions sitting under their own budget. Then within the PMCA budget, I've got the PMCA's contract, and I can see that that has been broken down to match the scope, to match the actual schedule in the back of the PMCA's contract. And I can generate all the reporting that I need straight out of here to then submit up into CFI, either or outside of CFI, either through the appendice of a PCG report. And then if I'm adding in a variation against this contract, I can just click 3 dots next to the PM consultant, and I can add in a variation, make changes to the status, assign a category based on, again, the governance of the Department of Defence agency that you're working for. And then with that information added in, I'm tracking all of my contracts in a register, you know, the stock standard 101 contract register, got a variation register, and then adding in a payment claim. And this is grouped by contract. So I can see I've got payments here, progress claim 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And then as we're managing the payments from submission, approval, and then pay, we want to check actually that Roman, the Defence finance system for tracking actually paid invoices, is giving us what they call the posted date or the documented date. And then we want to change the status of these payments to paid so that it drops straight into the cash flow. And off the back of this, you can generate your own payment certificate. So this is a non-Defence pro forma notice. So that's an example. Or for the Defence customers, we can do it straight into, or sorry, for the CFI customers, we can do it straight into the Defence DECMS template. So that is a payment statement automatically generated out of the system. Just sign it, send it off. Then when that is paid, goes straight into the cash flow with that same breakdown: development phase, delivery phase, etc. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to take a detailed look at project B for an MMC. So I'll let you share, Mark.
Yep. All right, guys, thank you. And good to see many really familiar faces online here. And so my intention today is just to talk some specifics about the MC. And we all know the MC is a complex beast. It's where we really, as PMCAs, have to start to, in a lot of detail, manage the contract costs, procurements. And so there's a lot of nuances to the MC which are really important. Obviously, one of those is that we as a PMCA have an independent cost plan, independent of the MC, so that we can manage costs for the client and inform what scope looks like. And so if we don't have that, then we're relying on the contractor. Very often we don't have an informed position to provide the Commonwealth. So that's the intention, firstly, for an MC, for a PMCA, is that they would have a high degree of fidelity in order to inform the client on where their final forecast cost genuinely is, so that it can inform the cost, what scope you include. Doug, can you please bring up the PowerPoint so I can just see the notes there? So I wanted to just talk today about a few nuances. So with an MC, and I've gone into project B here, I'm just going to go straight into the cost module. And one of the first things that we want to be doing with an MC is we want to be pulling, obviously the MC during the planning phase is going to be putting together a cost plan which informs DBCs, SOEs, etc. We want to then transform what is an elemental cost plan into a trade budget breakdown. Now that's a really critical step that the MC will try to avoid to an extent, or we try to put that off as far as they can. But really, as PMCAs, we want to be mandating the fact that the MC must have a trade budget breakdown at the outset, done their full suite of procurement planning to inform what the cost plan looks like. And then as they've done that, then you're having the ability to be able to define across each of your work elements what sub-work elements are going to be in place. And at that point, you're able to define from your overall project budget, which is approved through your SOE, you've got a target reimbursable cost, which the MC needs to allocate appropriately across all of the trade budget breakdown, so that you're getting the trade budget breakdown in a structure that the MC is going to utilize. Now, this is going to allow you to track scope in delivery. So the TRC is fixed. The breakdown of the scope is fixed in your cost plan from day one before you sign off on any subcontract procurement. That's the ideal. The other thing we're tracking is we want to make sure that our work breakdown structure that the client is getting approved through Department of Finance is fixed now, so that we can set up our cost plan structure in that methodology within that structure, so that when we get to roll out at the end of the job, then we can use whatever cost plan we've done during the delivery phase, and rollout is a really simple process. At the end of our rollouts, all we do is just print off what we already have in our cost plan system, a cost summary system, and it feeds directly into the asset rollout. So those few things are really critical at the outset in the way that you define your cost structures. And I've always said to my teams, we don't allow the MC to let any subcontract package until our PMCA structure is fixed. And so we know it's right. So what we're working on is informing the client correctly at PCG, and we know it's targeted towards rollout at the end. The worst case scenario is you have a cost plan that you are using during delivery. It's not structured the way either the client wants to see it in reporting, or that you're going to roll out, and you waste a lot of time in that. So there's just some few thoughts just at the outset. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about today is just the way that you would stage your procurement. So you can see, obviously, we've got multiple work elements within this reimbursable work scope. So we've got a trade budget here, got some design services underneath that, those reimbursable works. Also, you can see these are aligned to generally Defence's purchase orders. So they'll have a reimbursable purchase order, they'll have an MC purchase order, and then they'll have the below the line items. And so we track these so that we can give the client a really clear picture on what their purchase order paid to date is at any stage live in system. Really valuable to do it that way and structure your cost plan that way. But when you're letting contracts, obviously then your MC is going to go out, run a procurement process, and provide a recommendation to you based on what their tender evaluation of their subcontract. So those subcontracts, when you enter those, it's going to you may have a situation where you have one subcontract which spans multiple work elements, and so you would be entering and making sure that in the subcontract tender docs that there's a very clear fee schedule breakdown to allow you to input the portion of that subcontracted value into each of your work elements. And that would occur, you may have a coach hire fencing contract in work element 1. Well, it may also appear in work element 2 electrical and work element 3 survey. It could occur across all three. So being really clear in the subcontract tender docs and defining and PMCA going into those and reviewing those really clearly before they go out to the market to get the structure in the fee schedule that you need for this from a subcontract level, so that you can input it properly into your PMCA cost plan schedule. Really important note there. Doug, can I just see that next line? Awesome. So once you've done that, then obviously then you're going to come back in and raise contracts. And so you're going to have numbers of contracts within your cost plan summary. Within Mastt, one of the great things that happens is when you have a reimbursable claim, you may have 250 subcontract claims in that one reimbursable claim. The system within Mastt allows you to go in, pull up a reimbursable claim, add a new claim, click in the fact that this is a reimbursable claim here, and then you can add every reimbursable. It will show, obviously I've only got 3 entered here, but it will show every subcontract that's been let. And rather than going into every individual subcontract and raising a claim on every individual subcontract, Mastt gives you this great functionality of being able to go in here and quickly adding these subcontracts on one claim form, print them out and they occur, or submit them, and they all will backfill into their cost in the cost plan accordingly. All right, so that's reimbursable claim. So I wanted to just touch on quickly uncommitted forecasts. So you'll see in this structure here, one of the things that we're really careful to do is, as project directors, we always want to be assessing overall variance. So I want to have a really clear picture all the time on what my variance is on the project. This is informing scope for the client. If I'm $1 million in gain, then I know that there's a potential that I might be able to reintroduce scope. If I'm in loss by a portion, then I know I have to make some decisions, either about scope or about defence contingency applications, or about real cost increase. And so we want to be really, as directors, we want to be able to have a clear picture on what that is all the time and know what that is all the time. So part of that then is when we raise our budget structure, we're going to have a really clear allocation of that and a breakdown of that budget. So within the subcontracts within work element 1, I've done just a very quick summary to show you here. We've got original budget breakdowns which align with the original trade budget breakdown. $100,000 here. I've got 25, 30, 15, 30. That's in accordance with the original trade budget breakdown. In order then to make sure that that is not skewing the variance, we want to be raising forecasts so that we're offsetting those values. Either we've got a subcontract that's already been let, and we've got subcontract values in, which will reflect a gain. In this case, for the electrical trade, I've got a contract at 26,732, and it's reflecting a loss of 31,000 against the original budget value. Or I don't have that yet, and I'm gonna input a forecast in to be able to offset that so that there's a zero gain. You can see that here in etc. You would have a zero forecast inputted, and then as you're raising those subcontracts and letting that, you're pulling that forecast and making that realized in the subcontract value, which gives you, once you've entered those budgets in initially, you're always raising a sub budget first. That's really critical. And then you're raising a contract under a sub budget for each subcontract line in an MC. What that gives you then is this variance against each subcontract. And so you're getting trending, you're getting the ability to say, okay, where client did my original cost plan fall down? Where did I have issues? And you'll be able to say to the client, well, across the board, our precast packages have let 30% over the original cost plan. And you're giving that to the client in the subcontract approval documentation, and you're giving them a really clear picture in their cost plan live that they get to see. And so another thing we use forecasts for is obviously if we've got known unknowns which are to be realised in the future, we're putting forecasts in to be able to accommodate that. You may have some trade reserve, you may have some unknown scope that you don't want to go into the subcontracted scope yet because it's not fixed. You put those amounts in a forecast, don't put them in the subcontract contract value, allow those to be materialized through the variation process through life of the subcontract. And that gives you a really clear picture on variance across every subcontract package. Fantastic for a PMCA to be able to say that. Mastt gives you the ability to see that. Whereas sometimes our Excel spreadsheets full of errors, whatever else it is, don't get that clarity of picture, don't get that clarity of view to be able to see that. So Mastt is a really useful tool in order to be able to affect that. So I want to just quickly, before we close, I'm conscious of time, just walk through managing costs from a cash flow perspective, some key highlights in cash flow. I've just clicked into the cash flow on one of the years within Project B here. And so when we raise forecasts within defence projects, Mastt gives us the ability to be able to define a forecast type. And that's really important because we always want the client to be able to see with the greatest level of fidelity what is composed within any value that we give them. And so we want to be able to have clear pictures in our cash flow so that the client can see that. So you can have uncommitted forecasts in Mastt, you can have pay to date values, you can have contracted cash flow values which are in light blue, you can have risk provision values which are in yellow, client contingencies which are in purple, you have CIG costs or extra defence costs which are in black. You want to be able to see everything you possibly can. So as you're defining these forecasts, you're raising risks within our risk module. You're defining those properly so they come into your cash flow properly. And then it gives you a really clear picture. So in this instance, if we're in the August month, we've got a claim that's been inputted in green in August. We've also got a forecast still extant within August, which is in blue. And then we've got a risk provision value, which as a director, we're going in here and saying, there's no way that risk provision can materialize this month through the variation process in order to make that cash flow realized. And so we would get rid of that, push all that right. We make the rule here at Mastt in your governance, have no risk provision in the 2 months preceding, in the 2 months forward of the current month. And then you can see here, last thing that I'd raise, we want to have really clear definitions of our baseline and our target line. And so we encourage our defence clients to use your baseline for PAEs and PBS, and that can be updated quarterly at the client's discretion when you do your quarterly updates. And then also you would have your target line, which I fix March in every year. I want my contractor to fix his contracted target cash flow amounts for the next financial year and make sure that they're fixed in March, go into the next month and hold them to account for that target line, show it regularly, ask questions, give reasons why there's variance. Mastt gives you the ability to be able to see that. I know I'm close to time.
I was just thinking, really nice to cap this off with the Defence Excel.
Great.
Once you've got it all locked in here.
Yep. And so the last thing we always try to encourage our CFI clients to do is to manage their monthly review sheet through the Defence Excel. So you see I've clicked into that button there. We now have a feature here at the bottom. You can toggle this on and pull only the budget items in the Defence Excel here. You can see you can toggle on each of those. This then allows you to generate that Excel, which is it's a direct derivative from the pastel cash flow monthly review sheet that the client has. It pops up here for us at the bottom. We can have a look at this in Excel. It comes directly up exactly the way that they like it. And you can pull that data, punch it straight into that disgusting PowerPoint that everyone wrestles with every month. And so whether you can get your CFI client to do that directly or you like to do that for them and fire it across, that's a really a clean way to do that. Doug.
Cool. I'll just mute. Cool. Thanks, Mark. No shortage of knowledge there. I think if I let Mark keep going, he could keep talking for an eternity on the management of an MC project. But no, that was great. So what we've just recapped is, from a project team level, how that data is getting in easier and how that information is being provided in a way to a project director that is, totally visible so that they can drill down and actually make assessment of the spend to give scope back to the client, deliver more capability. And then it's also easy for us to get that out of Mastt into a format that is, very, very close, if not identical, to what the client is expecting. So it makes the client's life easier for the work they need to do internally. Now, today was very much focused on finances and injecting those finances into the client's format. However, there is some sideways reporting here that we are working on through the evolution of Mastt. So you could think about we've picked up, all of the messy Lego pieces that were in the spreadsheets. We've arranged it into a really neat system. And now we're starting to generate reports out of these systems. And so one of the things that we've been generating with a few of our PMCA customers recently has been the automation of a project control group or a program control group report. And just because you don't see that data in Mastt doesn't mean that we can't put it into a static Word format table automatically. So this feature is something that we're working on right now. Automated PCG report, save more time. And then to my introductory point, we've got all of this really rich data that we're going to start to give back to the PMCA so they can benchmark their own performance back to past projects. And it's always nice to finish on a quote. And this was from one of our great customers at the Army who said that Mastt has transformed the way they manage contract, project and program information. giving them, predictive insights and a level of transparency that was just not previously attainable. So that's all for today's short webinar. I've got my email up here on the screen if anyone wanted to reach out to Mark or I to ask a question or discuss further. And if you wanted to do a deeper dive on some of what you've seen today, we're always happy to arrange a bit of a demonstration. So thanks for your time, everyone. Just on time. So that's perfect. Really appreciate all of you attending, and we'll distribute the recording around afterwards. Thanks a lot, guys.